Just as Plato had cited the ancient Egyptian legend of the sunken island of Atlantis, the Greek historian Herodotus mentioned the Egyptian legend in the continent of Hyperborea in the far north. When ice destroyed this ancient land, its people were said to have migrated south. Writing in 1679, the Swedish author Olaf Rudbeck identified the proto-Atlanteans with the Hyperboreans and located the latter at the North Pole. In Greek mythology, the Hyperborean people lived, quote, beyond the north wind. The Greeks thought that Boreas, the god of the north wind, one of the anemoi or winds, lived in Thrace, and therefore Hyperborea indicates a region that lay far to the north of Thrace. Herodotus recorded that 3 earlier sources had mentioned the Hyperboreans, including Hesiod and Homer. This land was described as perfect, with the sun shining 24 hours a day, suggesting a location within the Arctic Circle. According to the classical Greek poet Pindar, quote, "Never the muse is absent from their ways. Lyres clash and flutes cry, and everywhere maidens' choruses whirling. Neither disease nor bitter old age is mixed in their sacred blood. Far from labor and battle they live." Along with Thule, Hyperborea was one of the several terrae incognitae to the Greeks and Romans, where Pindar, Herodotus, Virgil, and Cicero all reported that people lived to the age of 1,000 and enjoyed lives of complete happiness. Hecateus of Abdera collated all the stories about the Hyperboreans current in the 4th century BC and published a lengthy treatise on them, lost to us, but noted by Diodorus Siculus. In the regions beyond the land of the Celts, there lies in the ocean an island no smaller than Sicily. This island, the account continues, is situated in the north and is inhabited by the Hyperboreans, who are called by that name because their home is beyond the point whence the north wind blows, and the island is both fertile and productive of every crop and has a temperate climate. Hecateus of Abdera also wrote that the Hyperboreans had a, quote, circular temple on their island, and some scholars have tried to identify this with Stonehenge. Ptolemy and Marcion of Heraclea both placed Hyperborea in the North Sea, which they called the Hyperborean Ocean. Also, the sun was supposed to rise and set only once a year in Hyperborea, which would place it above or upon the Arctic Circle, or more generally in the Arctic polar regions. Alone among the 12 Olympians, Apollo was venerated among the Hyperboreans. The Hellenes thought he spent his winter among them. The ancient Greek writer Theopompus, in his work Philippica, claimed that Hyperborea was once planned to be conquered by a large race of soldiers from another island, and some have claimed this was Atlantis. The plan was said to have been abandoned because the invading soldiers were too strong for them, and they were the most blessed of people. This unusual tale, which some believe was a myth, was preserved by Aelian, Varia Historia. Greek legend asserts that the Boreads, who were the descendants of Boreas and the snow nymph Chion, founded the first theocratic monarchy on Hyperborea. This legend is found preserved in the writings of Aelian. This god, Apollon, has as priests the sons of Boreas, north wind, and Chion, snow. 6 cubits in height, about 3 meters. The Boreads were thus believed to be giant kings, around 3 meters tall, who ruled Hyperborea. Aelius Herodianus in the 3rd century wrote that the mythical Arimaspi were identical to the Hyperboreans in physical appearance. See De Prosodia Catholica 1:114. And Stephanus of Byzantium in the 6th century wrote the same in Ethnica 1:18-16. The ancient poet Callimachus described the Arimaspi as having fair hair. Northern Europeans, Scandinavians, when confronted with the classical Greco-Roman culture of the Mediterranean, identified themselves with the Hyperboreans, oftentimes neglecting the ancient and traditional aspect of a perpetually sunny land beyond the north. The Smoky God, Voyage to the Hollow Earth, is a story of a Norwegian, Olaf Jansen, and his father, in their trip on a sailboat to the inner Earth via the glaciers of the North Pole region. Olaf Jansen was born in 1811 and was 19 years old when he took that fateful fishing trip with his father between April and June of 1829. It was after they reached Franz Josef Land from Stockholm that the two decided to venture even further north, where they believed they would find the land of the Chosen. After escaping a fierce storm and perilous icebergs, they sailed smoothly for 11 days, always in what seemed to be a northerly direction. A few days later, they reached the shores of a mighty river, which further carried them inland for another 10 days, coming to around the 1st of September. They anchored on a sandy beach, whereupon they were greeted by 6 giant men, whom befriended them. According to Olaf's father, the people had large, beautiful houses adorned with gold, which was a very common metal there. The principal occupation was agriculture, and they had vineyards and grew grains. The vegetables and fruits were lush and huge and exquisitely delicious. The trees and forests and animals were also huge, and the air was invigorating. John G. Bennett wrote a research paper entitled The Hyperborean Origin of the Indo-European Culture, in which he claimed the Indo-European homeland was in the far north, which he considered the Hyperborea of classical antiquity. This idea was earlier proposed by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, whom Bennett credits, in his The Arctic Home in the Vedas, 1903, as well as the Austro-Hungarian ethnologist Karl Penka in Origins of the Aryans, 1883. H.P. Bilavsky, René Guénon, and Julius Evola all share the belief in the Hyperborean, the polar origins of mankind, and a subsequent solidification and devolution. Hyperborea was the golden age polar center of civilization and spirituality. Mankind does not rise from ape, but progressively devolves into the ape-like condition as it strays physically and spiritually from its northern homeland. Robert Charot first related the Hyperboreans to an ancient astronaut race of, quote, reputedly very large, very white people, end quote, who had chosen, quote, the least warm area on the Earth because it corresponded more closely to their own climate on their home planet, end quote. From Critias by Plato, 360 BCE. You remember only one deluge, though there have been many. You and your fellow citizens are descended from the few survivors that remained, but you know nothing about it because so many succeeding generations left no record in writing. The change in the rising and setting of the sun and the other heavenly bodies. How in those times they used to set in the quarter where they now rise, and used to rise where they now set. Of all the changes which take place in the heavens, this reversal is the greatest and most complete. There is at that time great destruction of animals in general, and only a small part of the human race survives.
If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to us and hitting the like button. Feel free to write a comment below and suggest which theory you want to see next. If you'd like to further support this channel, please consider joining. Our membership link will be found in the description box below. We appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for watching.